Good evening, Dungeon Masters, I'm Baron Darop. So your players have finished running through the Lost Mines of Phandelver or the Dragon of Icespire Peak, but your players want to keep the adventure going. Fortunately, with a geopolitical analysis of the region around Phandalin, you'll discover there's no shortage of possible quest ideas you can flesh out and throw at your players. The town of Phandalin is nestled into the foothills north of the Sword Mountains, and therefore has access to the gold, platinum, and cold iron veins found easily in the mountains themselves. Unfortunately, however, there is no large river system flowing by the area, so ore shipments can't be ferried downstream, and any agriculture done in the region likely can't produce enough caloric output beyond subsistence farming. Therefore, in order to keep up with the caloric demands of a mining population, food will need to be imported from elsewhere by way of overland merchant caravan, a risky and expensive endeavor. Further, looking north of Phandalin, Neverwinter Wood dominates the terrain and holds pockets of ruined towns and fortifications, like Thunder Tree Lumber Camp and Cragmaw Castle ruins. Additionally, nearby population centers include another mining town named Lylan, a subsistence farming village called Coneyberry, and the huge metropolis of Neverwinter, which sits at the mouth of its like-named river. Phandalin's economy being recently invigorated with an influx of cash thanks to speculative mining interests in Neverwinter is still quite a ways into the frontier. Therefore, a spur road connecting Phandalin to Tribor Trail is likely unpaved and very rugged. These poor road condition makes exporting mineral ore back to Neverwinter extremely difficult and expensive, as well as an easy target for brigands. Additionally, the expansive grasslands north of Phandalin, which Tribor Trail traverses, makes these vulnerable caravans even more exposed. Worse still, the Neverwinter Wood offers sufficient fortification and shelter for small raiding groups to predate these roads while staying safe from any meaningful patrols who might want to go looking for them. Interestingly, the mines investors hailing from Neverwinter likely take much greater offense to any raiding than would be typical of other investors from any other town on the Sword Coast. This large city has a culture of extreme efficiency and industriousness, as made evident by the regional expletive, "By the clocks of Neverwinter." This industrious culture is likely what has caused the city to be such a powerhouse of technological and magical development, which enables their investment in Phandelver's mine operation to start with. Similar real-world industrious cultures exist in Enlightenment-rooted, Protestant-adjacent communities as well, hailing from England, the Rust Belt of North America, as well as northern Germany or former Prussia. With that in mind, compare these organized, industrious, and methodical cultures to the people who are likely to move away from the big city and into Phandalin to work in the mines. You'll find these people are happy to get away from all of Neverwinter's rules and regulations. These people value how much their own effort impacts their lives directly. This kind of political and social tension between the orderly and authoritative demands of a large, distant city's investors and the more autonomous and self-reliant cultures of these frontier mining camps were seen all over the American West. A brief scene from the 2004 HBO Western Deadwood best illustrates this kind of cultural tension. In this scene, Al Swearingen, a cultural leader of the Deadwood camp, mocks the notion that new telegraph lines will lead to progress. When questioned by his lackeys about the difference between a telegraph and regular postage, other than the speed of transmission, Al blasts into an emotional and convincing tirade about how messages from invisible sources only bring bad news from nosy politicians and businessmen. Now imagine if Al were in Phandalin and people were constructing a teleportation circle instead of a telegraph line. At any rate, thoroughly convinced that they don't need the direct line to the East Coast, his lackeys offer to burn down the poles after nightfall. Long-term political and cultural tensions between Phandalin miners and Neverwinter investors aren't the only issue, however. The nearby town of Lylan is also an established mining powerhouse, and pulls ore from the same mountain system as Phandalin. It follows then that as prospectors move further into the Sword Mountains from both of these communities, contested mining claims are likely to become more frequent. While these two communities might be able to settle smaller disagreements on their own, larger or more complex disagreements disagreements will likely need to be settled by bureaucrats in Neverwinter. This reality is likely not very popular with the people in Phandalin, as they know Neverwinter can easily leverage these kinds of disagreements to their own benefit. Paved roads and patrols from Neverwinter might make ore and food shipments to and from Phandalin more secure, but it also puts Neverwinter businessmen and their lackeys smack in the center of town. Running encounters of brigands on the road between Phandalin and Neverwinter might become monotonous if every single one of them is focused on combat, but not all of them have to be. To mix things up, check out this video's sponsor, Describe, to search for all kinds of inspirational prompts you can turn into interesting encounters. Sometimes the aftermath of a raider attack is just as interesting as the direct confrontation with them, and this description, discussing a number of tipped over and picked clean wagons, and a lone survivor desperately clutching a glaive, doesn't disappoint. If those wagons were bound for Phandalin and filled with grain, the villagers are about to go hungry for quite some time. I love how inspirational prompts like this can get your creative juices flowing, and perhaps inspire an entire adventure. So shake off your creative block and click Describe's link in the description below. Be sure to use the coupon code Baron when you sign up to get 10% off. Thanks Describe for sponsoring this video. With our assessment of Phandalin's status quo complete, we can identify some strategic imperatives the people of Phandalin must manage if they want to remain a successful and healthy population. Firstly, figuring out a way to ensure the roadway safety from Tribor Trail to the well-patrolled High Road is an absolute must. The entire purpose of Phandalin's economy is wound up in its mining operation, and if the fruits of that labor can't be delivered back to Neverwinter, then all the prospecting, mining, and smelting isn't worth the effort. Additionally, exporting ore isn't the only reason for safe roads. Phandalin likely needs to import most of its food to keep the population healthy enough for mining. While some food can likely be grown near Phandalin, there won't be enough to support the non-farming population due to a lack of rivers for irrigation. Imported grain will likely have to come from Neverwinter or Tribor, a distant trading town to the east. Further, natural resource management between Phandalin and Lylan is also likely a serious point of contention, especially since both mining communities will want to involve Neverwinter as little as possible in any ongoing prospecting disputes. Involving bureaucrats from Neverwinter would only make sense if prospectors or mine managers believe they can settle a conflict that would tip the power balance between the two communities in their own favor. With all that said, any one of these imperatives, or even all of them at once, can be exploited by a nefarious actor wanting to disrupt or oppress the people of Phandalin and gain control of the mines. For example, an insidious mining manager from Lylan might hire bandits to take over Cragmaw Castle and harass trade caravans going into Phandalin. Further, now that the dragon threats of Venomfang from Thundertree and Cryovane from Icespire Peak are neutralized, Lylan agents might also attempt to strike a deal with Clawgillimater, also called the Nod One, a powerful green dragon that lives in the Cryptgarden Forest south of the Sword Mountains. Further, any smaller tribes of goblinoids in Neverwinter Wood, or any remaining orcs or ogres near Werven Tor, might also take up residence in the now vacant Cragmaw Castle ruins, possibly all on their own accord. Finally, Neverwinter agents themselves might illicitly instigate these raiders, paying brigands to create a problem that only Neverwinter agents can solve, a manufactured problem, all to take more direct control of the mine. Regardless, if raiders, goblins, orcs, or whatever roost back into the Cragmaw Castle, the City Slicker investors will likely exert more direct physical authority into the region and hire private mercenaries to patrol and pave roads and otherwise take a more hands-on approach to Phandalin mining operations. While a show of force might secure the mines, this also might invite suspicion and investigation from the Harpers, an anti-tyranny faction with secret agents all over the Sword Coast. In essence, just because your players may have completed the adventures in the starter sets, doesn't mean that the people of Phandalin are without problems. History has no endgame, and Phandalin's problems are just getting started. If you'd like to help me make more content like this in the future, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night.